Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. UUCE is located on the ancestral land of the Kalapuya people, whose descendants are now members of two confederated tribes in Oregon. My name is Bob Sorentz, serving as your worship associate this morning, and my pronouns are he and him. With me today is our settled minister, Reverend Jen Youngsun Rue, community pulpit speaker, Barbara Kellogg, collaborative pianist, Suzanne Giordano, interim director of faith formation, Sarah Sauter, and behind the scenes, working tech, is Kat Johnson. We gather in worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad you are here. If you are visiting with us today, we'd love to hear from you and invite you to fill out the visitor form as you feel called. The link is being dropped into the chat now.
Sunday morning, everyone. I'm Rev Jen, and I use the pronouns she and her. And I'm very happy to be serving this wonderful church in Eugene, Oregon. It's a sunny day here with just enough smoke in the air to remind me of all the people and the animals in harm's way. For those of you who don't see the video, I'm in the sanctuary this morning, properly distanced from Bob and Suzanne. I just want to remind you that there is a lot of great information in your weekly connections, especially as this church year ramps up. So please make sure to do at least like a 20-second scan of the email when it comes to you. And then you won't miss things like the fact that next Sunday is water communion, and it'll be both online and in person in the parking lot. Masks are required, and Sarah Sauter is so excited to meet you. She is our incoming interim director for faith formation, and here she is.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, Eugene. My name is Sarah Sauter, she, her, and I am now serving your congregation as interim director of faith formation. I have served as a UU professional for over 20 years. I am now in Taos, New Mexico. 2 of my 3 grown children were born in Corvallis, however, so I have some Oregon roots. I will be in person with you next week, September 12th, and I hope you'll join me after our in-gathering for a meet and greet on the playground, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Our chalice lighting this morning was written by Rosemary Bray McNaught, president of the Star King School for Ministry, and it's an excerpt from Been in the Storm So Long. The truth is this: if there is no justice, there will be no peace. We can read Thoreau and Emerson to one another, quote Rilke and Alice Walker and Howard Thurman, and think good and noble thoughts about ourselves. But if we cannot bring justice into the small circle of our own individual lives, we cannot hope to bring justice to the world. And if we do not bring justice to the world, none of us is safe, and none of us will survive. Nothing that Unitarian Universalists need to do is more important than making justice real here where we are. Hard as diversity is, it is our most important task.
September at church always feels the same to me, energizing and exciting and full of possibility. I know this is a very frustrating time for a lot of you, mostly because of this pandemic, but I want you to know that we are here for you. The church is open, not for worship yet, but the staff is busy rebuilding connections and restarting programs. So please call us and reach out. Months ago, when I first met Barbara Kellogg, I knew I would want to talk to her about her labor organizing experience. In our conversations, she and I meandered from labor to the related issue of classism. Like all the isms that we confront, this kind of oppression based on social status can limit us in so many ways. The Reverend Mark Harris wrote his book, Elite, Uncovering Classism in UU History, because he understood the connection between our vision of multicultural ministry and the history of privilege in our faith. He writes, "We assume that UU congregations belong only in wealthy suburbs where the grass is greener and the children go to high-achieving schools. How shall we hold this historic legacy while living into the vision of our multicultural liberal faith? Come, let us join hearts and spirits. Come, let us worship together." Clarence Skinner, one of our Universalist ancestors, held a vision that I share. It's the vision of a community pulpit, where the pulpit is not dominated by ministers, but shared with experts in many fields. And when it comes to your life, you are the undisputed expert. This morning, let's welcome Barbara Kellogg to the community pulpit.
Hi, my name is Barbara Kellogg and I use she, her pronouns. I had to learn about white privilege, but I had a sense of class privilege pretty early on. I was a little too middle class for my working class Detroit neighborhood, and a little too working class for the upper middle class Unitarian church I started attending at the age of 5. When I was a kid, class differences didn't get in the way of friendship, but as I grew older, they began to matter. I am a child of the 60s, inspired by the Civil Rights Movement, the March on Washington, and Dr. King's dream. I wanted to be part of it, at the heart of it. Working for the movement was how I wanted to spend my life. My 2 best UU friends went to Swarthmore. I went to Wayne State. I also began to notice that my beloved church was filled with professors, doctors, lawyers, and such, but no one from the working class, and certainly no poor people. By the time I graduated from high school, it no longer felt like home. The years passed, I married, moved to California, and became active in the labor movement. I had the honor of being hired as a staff organizer by Service Employees International Union in 1985. I was inspired by the campaigns to organize farm workers, home care workers, fast food workers, folks who often weren't even considered to be workers and had very few legal rights. I felt so lucky to have a job where I could put my values into practice. My coworkers and the members I represented were some of the most generous, courageous, and compassionate people I have ever met. They work tirelessly to ensure justice on the job and justice in the community. As UUs, we need this joy, energy, and resilience in our congregations. But very few union members are attracted to our faith. Historically, we were an upper middle class church, and remnants of the past remain. Not long ago, I invited one of my members to UUCE. She was curious about our church and was eager to come. That Sunday, we had a guest speaker, and the sermon focused on a study of identity from Yale. At the end of the service, I asked my friend what she thought. Her response was, "Yale? Really? I just want to go to community college. Are all these people rich?" Like white supremacy, classism is pervasive, rarely acknowledged, and hurtful. It can divide people and make people feel like they don't belong. I was so sad that that was the message my friend took away. Our faith can empower amazing things if we accept the challenge to make this sacred space a home where everyone knows they belong. Now, please join in singing hymn 126, "Come Thy Font of Every Blessing." Each verse was written by different people. The first by an 18th century Methodist, the last by a 19th century Universalist, and the middle verses were written by Dr. Eugene, who directed the UUA's religious education department in the 1980s.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to see what comes. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, be fair as heaven above. This week not only commemorates Labor Day and marks the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, but this Saturday will be the 20th anniversary of the attacks of 9/11. This poem by Martin Espada is called Albanza, in praise of Local 100. For the 43 members of the hotel employees and restaurant employees, Local 100, working at the windows on the World Restaurant, who lost their lives that day.
Alabanza. Praise the cook with a shaven head and a tattoo on his shoulder that says, "Oye," a blue-eyed Puerto Rican with people from Fajardo, the harbor of pirates centuries ago. Praise the lighthouse in Fajardo, candle glimmering white to worship the dark saint of the sea. Alabanza. Praise the cook's yellow pirate cap, worn in the name of Roberto Clemente, his plane that flamed into the ocean, loaded with cans for Nicaragua, for all the mouths chewing the ash of earthquakes.
Alabanza. Praise the kitchen radio, dial clicked even before the dial on the oven, so that music and Spanish rose before bread. Praise the bread, alabanza. Praise Manhattan from 107 flights up, like Atlantis glimpsed through the windows of an ancient aquarium. Praise the great windows where immigrants from the kitchen could squint and almost see their world, hear the chants of nations, Ecuador, Mexico, República Dominica, Haiti, Yemen, Ghana, Bangladesh. Alabanza, praise the kitchen in the morning, where the gas burned blue on every stove and exhaust fans fired their diminutive propellers. Hands cracked eggs with quick thumbs, or sliced open cartons to build an altar of cans. Alabanza, praise the busboy's music, the chime of his dishes, and silverware in the tub.
Alabanza, praise the dish dog, the dishwasher, who worked that morning because another dishwasher could not stop coughing, or because he needed overtime to pile the sacks of rice and beans for a family floating away on some Caribbean island plagued by frogs. Alabanza, praise the waitress who heard the radio in the kitchen and sang to herself about a man gone. Alabanza. After the thunder, wilder than thunder, after the shudder deep in the glass of the great windows, after the radio stopped singing like a tree full of terrified frogs, after night burst the dam of day and flooded the kitchen, for a time, the stoves glowed in darkness like the lighthouses in Fayado, like a cook's soul. Soul, I say, even if the dead cannot tell us about the bristles of God's beard because God has no face. Soul, I say, to name the smoke beings flung in constellations across the night sky of this city and cities to come. Alabanza, I say, even if God has no face.
Alabanza. When the war began from Manhattan to Kabul, two constellations of smoke rose and drifted to each other, mingling in icy air. And one said, with an Afghan tongue, "Teach me to dance. We have no music here." And the other said, with a Spanish tongue, "I will teach you. Music is all we have."
Alabanza, praise to all who make music. Alabanza, praise to all who do the work that enables us to survive and thrive. You all haven't met my husband yet. He's back in South Carolina until his youngest graduates from high school next year. But Ken will be here in October, so I hope that you'll have a chance to meet him. I met Ken 10 years ago when I was serving a congregation in Virginia, and he was a police lieutenant working 2 towns over. Now, he had never heard of a Unitarian Universalist, so he started going to a small fellowship in his neighborhood just to find out what it was all about. Even though he found them to be an extraordinarily friendly, very huggy bunch of people, he did notice that a lot of them were professors and retired executives and people who didn't always have grease under their nails from working on the car all weekend. He hasn't always felt comfortable in UU settings, and I know he's not the only one. I married a half Japanese, half North Carolina hillbilly. Now, he told me I could use that word. And because of him, I became part of a military family. I became part of a working class family with deep roots in Appalachia. Viewing life from this angle, I became really aware of how easily our society denigrates people from the hills, on the farms, in the swamps. My colleague, the Reverend Karen Hutt, talks about the day that she heard her great-grandfather, whose father was an enslaved person. She remembers hearing him tell this story. Now, she doesn't remember all the details of the story, but she does remember him saying very loudly, "Well, you know, there ain't nothing but poor white trash over there." And everybody laughed, and she laughed right along, even though she had no idea what they were talking about. It would be years and years later when she was a young adult working in South Boston, working primarily with white youth living in public housing. It wasn't until then she would realize what those words meant. So one afternoon, she went knocking on the door of one of her charges, and his mother welcomed her in and directed her to sit down. And she sees that she's about to sit down on the entire front seat of a Mustang that was serving as their couch. These were the other white people, she thought. These were the white people that she and everybody she knew disdained. They were the butt of their jokes as they watched the Beverly Hillbillies and Hee Haw, and then later as they morphed into Honey Boo Boo and Duck Dynasty. All of our congregations say they embrace people from all socioeconomic levels. But Unitarian Universalists carry forward certain cultural habits that unintentionally put up barriers to belonging. And the result is that many of our churches have very little diversity when it comes to social class or income levels. We can trace those cultural habits to colonial America, where Unitarianism developed under a peculiar system where its members and its clergy also happen to hold the most powerful positions in their towns. After the Civil War, the American Unitarian Association was only open to white male ministers. And so it's not so surprising that they voted to plant churches only in college and university towns, saying that they plan to, quote, evangelize highly educated people or a cultural elite. This proved to be one of the association's most successful extension activities. Fast forward to the 1950s and another church expansion plan comes in. But this time they want more racial and economic diversity. But then they qualify this by saying, quote, people in some professions are more responsive to liberal religion's appeal. These included natural scientists, social scientists, architects, engineers, social workers, and modern educators. So it seems there was a general disregard for non-college educated blue-collar work, and that cultural habit still lingers in some of our churches today. Unitarian Universalism has historically been a community of privileged people, so addressing classism has not been among our top priorities. Charitable acts, yes, but confronting the ways that classism operates in our congregations, not so much. Without thoughtful attention, our churches can leave some people feeling unsure if they really belong. A dear soul at my last church confessed to feeling self-conscious in UU circles because she had never gone to college. So here are some assumptions that some UU churches may make about their fellow congregants. They may assume that everybody can go out to lunch after Sunday services, or that members with status or resources have more power to influence decisions in the church. that membership must be tied to financial pledging, that it is somehow impolite or crass to talk about money and class, that emotionality and spiritual passion just doesn't fit in with the way we do church. And then this most harmful and false assumption that only certain types of people are attracted to a liberal faith. When we remain silent on the effects of classism within our church and within our wider community, we miss out on the impact that we could achieve when we join together. Working class, upper class, college educated, rich, poor. In one sense, these are all just made up categories that separate us from the other. But in this material world, these categories can mean the difference between life and death. In times of war and disease, after a hurricane and an earthquake, it matters if you are rich or if you are poor. Over the years, the gap between the very rich and the very poor has increased because the most wealthy Americans saw their income go up faster than any other group. And this growing inequality has just made the friction between the classes more intense. Now, we could blame technology, globalization, the decline of unions for this growing income gap. But you can also add to that list the decline of religious institutional power. Churches used to be the champion of the working class, centers for organizing and coalition building across race and class. And this was exactly the kind of grassroots church basement organizing that the Reverend William Barber was raised on. Reverend Barber was in grade school in a fully integrated public school in Indiana. It had been 11 years since the Brown versus Board of Education ruling ended segregations in school. And even though the Barber family lived in relative comfort and ease in Indiana, they also knew that the schools down south were not living up to these laws. So his family pulled him from that school and moved him south, where Barber attended a segregated school while his parents fought what they called a moral crusade. Today, Reverend Barber puts that moral imperative right in the middle of the Poor People's Campaign. As co-chair of that campaign, he has helped to build a fusion movement with all kinds of people, picking up Martin Luther King Jr.'s work to dismantle the intersecting evils of racism, militarism, and economic injustice. The Poor People's Campaign brings together a diverse coalition. I know there's an Oregon group up in Portland, and I gotta think there must be one in Eugene, because the latest figures from the Lane County United Way shows that 45% of families here are ALICE. Now, I just learned what this means. ALICE stands for asset limited, income constrained, and employed. Nearly half of our families are earning more than the federal poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living, which means they're living with financial insecurity. The UU Church in Eugene includes both people with limited assets and people with substantial wealth, those whose income is constrained and whose income is free-flowing, people who are employed and underemployed and thankful to be retired. We celebrate workers today. We praise them. Alabanza, the waiter and the dishwasher, the one who takes away our garbage, and the butchers who clean our meat. And here at UUCE, we celebrate the office administrator and the bookkeeper and the children's program worker and the custodian and the ministerial intern and the pianist and the tech guru who all keep this church going and have kept the church going through some of the most difficult months ever faced by a church staff. Our church is not only a spiritual community of seekers and justice makers, it is also a local employer. Even though we may employ fewer than a dozen people, we can still make our values known through the way we treat our staff. One of Rev Lowe's parting requests was to make sure to give the staff a bonus for the extraordinary work they did over these past 18, 19, 20 months. I'm pleased to say that thanks to your generous gifts, we were able to distribute those bonuses a few days ago. Today, we're going to gather at 1 o'clock in the parking lot for a very simple reception so you can personally thank our staff, both in person and over Zoom. And I'm very sad to say that because of the current COVID risk and the outdoor mask mandate, we can't actually eat cake together, but you're going to have some delicious pieces to take home with you. I love that our faith remains open to the times in which we live and is adaptable to our changing knowledge. We are not the same as we used to be. Unitarian Universalists are more diverse, and yet the institutions we are a member of aren't always keeping up. The UUA has written a program to go along with that book I mentioned earlier, Elite by Mark Harris. It asks us to consider questions like this. How would people in our town describe this congregation in terms of class and economic status? And what picture of your congregation emerges from our founding story with regard to class or elitism? So I am going to drop some of these resources that I've talked about into the chat here. And if you are interested in following up, just let us know. Let's see. All right, there you go. You've got the book, the link to the class, and a couple of other links. And because this is such a big topic and so much has been left unsaid today, I asked Barbara to return to the community pulpit in November to carry forward this conversation. Our deepest connection with one another is a moral one. It's not about if and when you went to school or what kind of job you hold or what kind of neighborhood you live in, what kind of books you read or shows you watch. I mean, yes, it's nice and comfy to hang out with people who have similar interests and background, but that's what your social life is for. Your spiritual life and the life of this spiritual community is for encountering the other. Our strongest connections are moral ones, revealed when we are moved by the cries of our neighbors, when we perform acts of care for the vulnerable, when we see no stranger, when we protect the worker, and when we fight for an equal chance at a full, healthy, and prosperous life. May it be ever so. Blessed be. Amen. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another in the hour of success and when we look for someone to share our triumphs. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. I invite you now to share the joys and sorrows that are in your hearts today. The chat feature is now open. Thank you everyone for sharing. I hope you all got a chance to read through some of those comments. Let us lift up our hearts in thanks for this gathered community, which welcomes us as we are from wherever we have come. O Spirit of life, it has been a weary and disappointing summer for some of us. For others, it was a time of change and unexpected pleasure. And certainly it has been a time of loss. We have lost loved ones and continue to say goodbye to members. We learned that this week that Charlie Hirsch died recently. We don't have any contact information, so if you know how to get in touch with his family or friends, please let us know. And our condolences for Dorothy Clark, our longtime member who died yesterday, and her daughter, Julia Clark. We send prayers of healing to Nadia and Felicia's mother, who is in the hospital with multiple pelvic fractures. And several people stated their gratitude for healthcare workers, so many wonderful people helping to heal with their loves. The fires continue to burn. Victims of hurricanes and earthquakes still don't have power and the basic essentials. We send our prayers to them, but we're also encouraging you to use the UU Service Committee as a trusted way to send your donations. And alongside those sorrows and concerns and worries, we also celebrate. Rosh Hashanah starts this week, and so we send our greetings for a blessed new year to all who observe this Jewish holidays. There are birthdays and celebrations as well. For all these marvelous gifts of life and love and friendship, for all the joys and sorrows that are held in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, we lift up our hearts in thanks. Amen.
And let us join in singing hymn number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? Our holy church, where race and class unite, as equal persons in the search for beauty, truth, and right. Where is our holy writ, where a human heart a sacred torch of truth has lit, by inspiration taught? Where is our Holy One? A mighty host respond. The people rise in every land to break the captive's bond. Where is our holy land? Within the human soul, wherever free minds truly seek with character the goal. Where is our paradise, an inspiration sight, wherein we hope to see arise 10,000 years of right.
Are we ready to extinguish? We extinguish this chalice, but certainly not the light of love, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we will carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, as you turn toward the rest of your day and toward the beginning of a new week, take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Go in peace, everyone.